Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Inshallah, today we're going to continue speaking about taraf. Of course, last 2 weeks we actually talked about taraf and we talked about some of the sides of taraf. And we said that taraf is really engaging in luxurious lifestyle, in whether we're talking about the way we eat, the way we dress, the way we're living our life. And of course, we talked about the different civilizations, including the Muslim civilization, and how this luxurious lifestyle had actually affected its morality, affected its ecology, affected its energy and its ability to stay surviving and of course stay in its power and its strength. And right now, inshallah, we're going to go into talking about two things: the psychology of, we're going to use the word taraf like we promised before, and we said it, taraf is basically living in a luxurious lifestyle, seeking luxury, seeking some form of gaining, what is the word that we could use, gaining more of dunya. And of course, the opposite of a taraf is basically living in a zuhd. So the opposite of a taraf is zuhd. Zuhd is basically to live an ascetic life, a simple life, a life where you've got your money not in your heart, but your money is in your hand. You're controlling what you are, what you're buying, what you are taking in, what you're consuming, all of that. You're controlling it based on the principle. So it's controlling your consumption based on the principle, and not the principle in itself be consumption. So that's basically that simple part of it, in where, yes, I'm consuming, but I'm consuming based on principle, not the principle of consumption. So it's not that we're somehow trying to just enhance and expand our consumption just for the sake of fame, or for the sake of appearance, or for the sake of show off, or for the sake of arrogance, but it's actually for the sake of gaining a certain level of principle in how we spend. Now, today, inshallah, we're going to talk about the psychology of taraf, and also, inshallah, continue speaking about, well, what does not living in taraf actually mean in Islam? And of course, we're working on a book that is by Muhammad Musa Sharif, who is a pilot and also a scholar in tafsir and Islamic studies, who's right now actually imprisoned in Saudi Arabia. And he was not imprisoned because he was committing some kind of a crime, but it was really because it objected the taraf lifestyle that MBS in Saudi Arabia is trying to get the Saudi Arabian culture, and Saudi Arabia as a general, as a general country, in order to get into a liberal lifestyle, in order to get into a different, of course, a different route. So that's why, someone like Muhammad Musa Sharif was definitely not going to be what he would like to be within the society, because that objects his own goal. All right, so let's get into what we're talking about, get out of politics for a little bit. So Ibn Khaldun, and it's really important to mention Ibn Khaldun because Ibn Khaldun is considered the most important figure in sociology, and a Tunisian scholar, but he actually talks about a number of different things that happen throughout history, and based on civilizations, and looking out the history, looking out people's behaviors and studying people's behaviors. So as a sociologist, he would talk about the implications of taraf, or the implications of people's lifestyles, including, of course, very simple lifestyle, and how it affects their behavior, how it affects their psychology, how it affects their religion, how it affects their morality, and so forth. And Ibn Khaldun actually says this point. He says, الترف, which, luxury, and also in expanding in the different blessings, whenever it happens to the different cities, it eventually leads them by the definition of seeking luxury. It just leads them into expanding different types of modernity, different types of trying to live up to that lifestyle, in where it comes, let's get into the art and using different methods of trying to seek luxury and trying to renew the different ways of getting luxury. And of course, at many times الكلف بالصنائع. So it's that they're actually not only trying to get to the necessities, but they're actually trying to use different forms and different ways of let's say building, or not only building, but we're speaking about different ways of expanding their forms of seeking luxury. And he says that that eventually has its own way of, and having its implication on trying to bring about new ways of fixing kitchens, clothes, houses, and architecture, and different forms of beddings and rooms and bedrooms, and even different utensils and all the different things, especially within the homes, even though they don't necessarily need it, but it becomes creating a need. This creation of a need, he says, it basically later on, it starts bringing in a different form of lust. So that in itself tries to push in and motivate an expansion of lust and desire, because then it's basically trying to seek different ways of seeking dunya, of seeking some form of luxury, some form of a feed, or some form of feeding its own of course making of dunya. And that in itself, he said, it becomes it hard for the person to let go of it, because every single time they expand with their luxurious lifestyle, they will become so accustomed to it, and they want further expansion. So they, because they have become accustomed to it, then that becomes too boring, then they have to increase it even more, and it becomes just their habit to find different ways and different methods for expanding this luxurious lifestyle. And then it becomes so impossible for them to fulfill the needs of luxury, so they become basically ending up in different mental illnesses. And it's really strange how, how many times, scholars would correlate and, relate between the expansion of taraf and even mental illnesses, and how people just trying to live up to a certain expectation, they start running after it, and then they can't cope with reducing backwards. They can't cope with regression in the lifestyle capacities that are right now considered as a capacity. So they can't live the basics. They start getting so used to something that is more expensive, something that is of a higher standard, then they're not able to live on the worst standard, because they have gotten so used to living the higher standard. And which is why, you've got different scholars that actually said, including Ibn Khaldun, he said then it becomes something that they feel that they have to get. In other words, that higher standard becomes the basics. It becomes the basics without them recognizing, and then it becomes so hard for them to live up to it. So they become really just slaves trying to live up to that standard that they had actually themselves invented. And then they start going out of the principles, because they would start feeling that there is a need. In other words, they would create a new need, and then they would have to work to fulfill that new need, and then they become enslaved to that new need, and then they start feeling that they can't get up to that new need. So then they would feel depressed, because they would feel behind. They would feel that they couldn't achieve it, and then they would feel failures. And that actually creates some sort of, one, the change in behavior. So then they have to find new ways. They have to find new ways to fulfill that need. And many of them would actually leave their principles, principles, whether in committing sin, probably needing to steal, maybe trying to gamble, maybe to engage in different forms of scamming, just in order to get the money because there's a new need that they had created. And this is extremely important to keep in mind because what we're seeing right now, especially with the younger generation going into different forms of recreational drugs and different forms of CBDs, different forms of to invent ways to let them calm down, let them get some form of soothing themselves on the inside, and without them recognizing that it was really a taraf. And this is, to be honest, really seen and very obvious in a number of different communities. It's not in one particular community, but especially those that had migrated to the West. Those that migrated to the West because the West is right now living this modernity, this luxury. You're seeing that it's also affecting our children, where our children are feeling that they are deprived and that they have to live up to a certain standard. If they don't live to a certain standard, then they feel entitled that they have to actually live up to that standard. And if they don't live to that standard, and in fact, they would feel entitled that they have to live it, even if the parents are actually trying to give them what they need, but they will still feel, well, my friend actually got this birthday party, this much and that. And of course, social media comes in and starts bringing in another form of expectation, especially with all the different filters and all the different the different things that you can take away from the picture. Then they don't recognize the amount of effort that was there to make this possible. They don't recognize all the different hardships that was there behind the scenes, and it becomes that the person is feeling that they have to live it without any of that suffering, without any of that hardship. And here he actually talks about the different forms of trying to sneak, trying to lie, trying to gamble, trying to cheat, trying to steal, trying to go beyond principle, and even engage in different forms of riba, interest. Now, this one's really important because the different forms of riba right now, it's like though many people, they don't want a simple car, a used car, that they actually have to buy a car, even if it's payments, or probably not even a simple home. No, they want to engage in mortgage because they want to get a bigger house. They want to get into a higher form of taraf. So they will engage in riba. Interest is a big issue. So that's their only way to actually live up to a standard. They can buy a car for probably $4,000, but they don't want to buy a used car for $4,000. They would rather buy a $50,000 car and pay $200 per month. And then why? Well, that's because they had created a certain standard of how everybody else is living. Therefore, I have to meet their standard. I have to live up to their standard. And that's where the best example, I guess, in how we could see taraf itself. This taraf had actually led people to letting go of their principle just to live that type of standard. Why? Because there's one other side of psychology of taraf, which is trying to just meet people's expectations, not necessarily their own expectation, but it's trying to appear in front of people to create a social status, to create some idea about the person amongst their peers, around the people, in order to gain different privileges around them, whether it's around the relatives, whether it's around the in-laws, or whether it's around around the society or at the job or whatever it is, really just for the sake of fame, just for the sake of appearing luxurious, high class, and therefore without them recognizing, they had actually went into the taraf and lost the principle little by little, gave up on their Islam, and then that took them into dunya. And it becomes a slippery slope because it's going to be really hard for them to go back because they're not used to the backward to that lifestyle that is simpler, and then they become just needing to go farther and farther, and then they start slipping within a taraf because because the ayah right there clarifies it and says وَإِذَا أَرَدْنَا أَن نُهْلِكَ قَرْيَةً أَمَرْنَا مُتْرَ فِيهَا فَفَسَقُوا فِيهَا فَحَقَّ عَلَيْهَا الْقَوْلُ فَدَمَّرْنَاهَا تَدْمِيرًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and whenever the Lord Almighty had decreed a certain village to basically get destructed, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would order on those that had actually lived the luxury, and the luxury resulted in them losing their principle and engaging in sin. Then it becomes incumbent, it becomes indeed what actually deserves the decree of the Lord Almighty, and then the Lord Almighty destructs it. I want you to recognize and notice here the correlation between one in where al-fisq and how it is correlated with the taraf. People, when they want to increase their expectations, they will little by little lose their akhlaq just to live those expectations. And you will see that in where it's trying to expand, whether expanding in the different ways of feed the person. It's not enough to just make a simple meal. No, we don't want to eat leftovers. Then we have to start right now expanding the different forms of cooking, different ways of trying to make it a luxurious meal. And of course, it becomes later on this expectation where the children are then, not only the children, but also the adults are not satisfied with a simple meal or even a leftover, or no, it has to be something that is luxurious. No, we don't want to eat today from the leftover cooking or whatever we have in the refrigerator. Let's buy a pizza, let's go and get something out, let's dine out, and the list goes on and on. Now that later on actually gets into the children and into ourselves, that we don't want something simple. We always are expecting a different standard. And later, that actually makes us in ourselves that we can't comfort ourselves with what we have. We start looking for a higher expectation, looking for a higher standard, and then we have to find different ways to go around our principles just to live up to that expectation. And of course, same thing when it comes to clothing. Oh, we don't want to wear the old clothes. We have to, every single year, we have to basically renew our wardrobe. We have to renew everything, even though our clothes are still fine. Our clothes are still very well, they're not torn, there's nothing wrong with them, but it's, well, people had seen me with this outfit, therefore I have to renew it. And he says that the akhlaq, that the morality that actually comes with trying to gain and trying to live up to taraf is actually the core of destruction, the core of delusion, because at the end of the day, in where human beings, it was part of their fitra to try to get some form of covering their benefits, their interests, their needs, fulfilling their needs, and trying to create some form of istiqama, some form of let's call it principle, in order to lead and get to the path of living in the stability, living their life to fulfill their needs. But then when you're looking at taraf, it basically becomes that the person had created a delusion that they have to create create a new capacity to make a need. In other words, they made a need, and then later they started running after this new need that they had created. It becomes a delusion, and then they start running after it. And then if they can't fulfill it, then they start feeling the sorrow, then they start feeling the depression. And this is one reason, subhanAllah, it's really sad how we're right now seeing that the lifestyle of taraf is actually one reason. It's really sad how one main reason taraf, we're not seeing many speaking about the correlation between taraf and mental illness. And I'm not at all saying that all mental illness is necessarily related to taraf. Absolutely not. And uh, this is definitely, an abusive word to say for those that are going through mental illnesses that are not related to taraf, because it's definitely not fair to accuse those that are going through mental illnesses that are not a result of taraf, but probably a result of just like any other illness, just like any other physical illness. But I'm saying that there is a form and there is one group of mental illness that is actually a result of taraf, or a result of getting away from the deen. And that must be spoken about. That must be explained. That must be emphasized, because if we don't emphasize this, then we're not curing a lot of those mental illnesses that are right now put on the category of mental illness, when in reality they're not supposed to be in the category of mental illness. It's supposed to be a heart illness, not a mental illness, because mental illness is supposed to be a different category. This is supposed to be within amrad al-qulub, the hearts, the illnesses within the heart. And that's what deen will come in to say, well, to cure this illness, this type of heart disease, is basically to live a simpler lifestyle. We need you to take away all that luxury, and we need you to live maybe in a cabin, maybe to live a simple lifestyle, maybe to move out of the country that you're in, maybe to live in Africa for some time, maybe to go to the hospitals for some time, maybe to visit the graves for some time, maybe to visit the different refugee camps for some time, to go there and actually see what these people are deprived of, what these people don't have, the calamities that these people are living, rather than increasing and expanding your expectation. Now you're trying to see the other side. Then you would be capable of recognizing the the ni'mah, the different bounties that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given you. Now, this is really important, because when we're speaking about the psychology of taraf, we're actually living it right now. So I don't want to increase in talking more about the psychology of taraf. So let's just see some of the different implications of taraf on the different people. So whether it's sometimes the psychology, their psychology is that, even if it's ulama right now, we're seeing scholars right now just expanding, and even du'at expanding just on for the sake of expanding in dunya. Many have actually become really unrecognizable in compared to those that are living dunya. So they would engage in, it's not wrong to have millions, by all means. It's definitely not wrong to necessarily be rich. In fact, نعم المال الصالح العبد الصالح. Having نعم المال is basically saying that the good money, the money that is in the hands of a salih person is actually something to be praised of, if they're using it for the good things, if they're using it uh, to probably bring in da'wah, to probably spending it for the good, spending it for the khair, spending it on the poor. In other words, if they're using the luxury, if you're using the money in order to spend it for the sake of bringing in good, for the sake of bringing in and enhancing principle within the individual and even the society, then that would actually be good. So let's look at some of the psychology and the implications of taraf. Number one says al-ghafla an darajat al-akhirah al-aliyah. What luxury leads to is al-ghafla, where the person is pacified away from focusing on the different levels of al-akhirah. And then there's no way that you could actually get to al-akhirah unless you do a lot of focus on whether it's Siyam. I want you to look at Siyam, and I want you to look at donations, and I want you to look at Salah. And you know what? Those are actually, let's look into it. We've got the five pillars of Islam. You got a Shahada, and that's more, taking in the vision. But then the level of Islam, you've got Salah, and you've got Siyam, you've got Zakah, and you got Hajj. All right. If you will look at all these, Salah, Siyam, Zakah, and Hajj, you look at Salah, there has to be some body, the capacity in your body, physical capacity, in order to be able to do it. If you look at Siyam, it's giving up on a lot of luxury in food in order to live up to Siyam. It's giving up on the luxury of food. It's giving up on food. Zakat, it's giving up on wealth. In Hajj, it's giving up on time. It's giving up on your money. It's giving up on your physical luxury. Let's call it that way. And that is totally the opposite of what it means to live luxury. In other words, the whole training of the pillars of Islam is really to learn how to not live the luxury. It's always focused on putting in a certain form of moderation. In order to be able to do salah, you have to have the body to do it. But if you're obese, you're barely going to get up. You're not going to be capable of getting up and doing that. Your body, if you're overeating or over drinking, then your body is just going to be needing more and more sleep in order to consume and digest all of that. And then you're not going to be capable of doing your salah. If you're overeating, if you're constantly just seeking food and you're constantly just working on finding different luxurious ways of trying to make meals. And right now, especially with social media, it's always just expanding different ways. And right now, cooking has become easier than ever before. You could just watch a video and 2 minute video, and then you've got right there, you're a master chef and cooking the most luxurious meals without you recognizing in 2 minutes. And it's just a reel on Instagram, just a reel on, or just a short video on YouTube, whatever it is. And there you are, you're a master chef. And all of a sudden, same thing, you're looking at home renovation, all of that. You're right now living in taraf where you can fix your own home, and you become a person that is so indulged in trying to make this dunya of yours just more expansive. And the tools have actually become a lot easier, and they're available for you to get to. And guess what? And you don't even have to have a lot of money to get that. It can be just at home. And this is extremely scary, and sometimes it can be, a slippery slope. But I'm not saying, you are not supposed to necessarily, make a good meal, etc. But we're looking at a dunya where it's taking us into more of it. That's what we're trying to get to. We're trying to get to recognizing that whether it's food or whether it's more money, and we're trying to recognize that right now we're increasing our expectations, and that is causing us to always feel that we don't have enough, that we're behind with our expenses because we had created new needs that are actually not necessarily needs. Yesterday, I got somebody sending me a message, and she wanted those $350 to buy some groceries from Target. Groceries from $350 because she was late on her paycheck. $350 to buy groceries. I mean, seriously, $350 to buy groceries. What kind of groceries are you buying? that actually needs $350. And please help us. We need to pay this $350 to buy groceries. Is this your first time shopping? Or, and this is for a mother and a child? $350? There, this is definitely just giving us an idea of how we think that by filling our pantry with all these granola bars, all these chocolates, all these different things, filling out the pantry, that is supposed to be a necessity, that this is the basic needs. This is not a basic need. A basic need we can actually live on just fulfilling. And definitely you could see obesity being an issue because we're filling our pantries with all these different types of candies, all these different types of cakes, all these different types of pies, all these different types, and it's just filling out all this stuff. And then we're struggling. The struggle is now how to lose weight. The struggle is now how to find time. Why? Because we had created so many different things on our schedule that are not even necessity. Oh, I have to take my son to Chuck E. Cheese. Oh, I have to take my son to play it's not once a year during the Eid, but no, every single week I have to take my son to this place to play. Every single week I have to make this time for gaming, or I have to make enough money to buy this new game, or I have to make the money to take them to the movies, or etc. That created a new form of taraf. Even the children are actually feeling entitled to this taraf. The children are feeling so entitled that when they're not given this taraf, they're actually feeling deprived. How come my cousin gets this? How come my aunt and whatever are getting this? And then they feel deprived, and then they go into depression, feeling abused. They would feel abused. Why? Because they couldn't get to living that created need and that expectation. Ibn al-Qayyim, he said, قال لي يوما شيخ الإسلام في شيء من المباح هذا ينافي المراتب العالية وإن لم يكن تركه شرطا في النجاة فالعارف يترك كثيرا من المباح برزخا بين الحلال والحرام. Ibn al-Qayyim was actually one of the most important scholars that wrote on spirituality. Ibn al-Qayyim, he has a book, Madarij al-Salikin, and he's a number of different books. If you really want to read on spirituality, Ibn al-Qayyim is definitely one of the most important figures that you actually want to read his books. And his books are so wide. You could see that beautiful Sufism that is the Sufi based on Sunnah in it. It's beautiful. His books are extremely important to read. And the good news, a lot of his books have been translated, and it's easy to find. All right. So Shaykh al-Islam, which is Ibn Taymiyyah, he saw him eating something that is actually permissible to eat. It wasn't haram, but he said, this is actually something that contradicts the high levels of spirituality. ينافي المراتب العالية. He said, and even though leaving it is not necessarily your condition to get into Jannah, but the person that knows Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would leave a lot of the permissible things, even though they could be, the things that are between halal and haram. It's not a haram thing, but they would leave it because they are seeking something higher. It's kind of like this. You can be a C student and still pass. You can still get to college with a C grade. You can, not the best colleges, but you'll get there. But a person that is seeking a higher level, they're trying to be an A+ student because they're aiming high. And think of it this way: the higher you aim, you have to work harder. If your aim is high, you have to give up. It becomes a trade-off. You have to give up on more things. You have to give up on a lot of eating. You have to give up on a lot of money spent. You have to give up on a lot of shopping. You have to give up on a lot of luxury and a lot of different things that you're doing. There's no way that you can aim high and still find time and even money and energy to spend on trivial matters. It's exactly like that. If you're aiming high, you aim the highest level of Jannah, then you have to give up on a lot of eating. Then there's no way that you could actually be a person that is living in all this luxury of food, luxury of clothes, luxury of cars, luxury of houses, luxury of finding time to play, finding time to take the kids out, and you going out to the movies, etc. There's no way that you're seeking akhirah. This is seeking dunya. Even though I wouldn't necessarily say that it's haram to have an expansive, beautiful home and a beautiful car and a classy car, etc. We wouldn't say it's haram. Absolutely not. But if you're seeking akhirah, be careful on the part that relates to taraf, because taraf, it basically makes you seek more of dunya, and you are taking yourself to creating needs that are not needs of survival, but are actually needs of taraf, needs of dunya, and not needs for the akhirah. And the second part, which is trying the other mental part about taraf, is that it's always connecting the person of finding different ways to live the dunya and then forgetting the goal of what dunya was all about. So their main goal, their own energy would only be focused, and I would say it becomes the center. Their center is really just to increase, not probably get a simple car, but no, now I need to somehow get a more expensive car. It's not just a simple home. No, now I need to get a nicer home, not this number square footage, but no, it has to be a bigger square footage. Now I have to find something even better in every single corner. And oh, and I need to, my other friend, she basically had a lot of cakes and a lot of these different beautiful things that she was doing on her bridal shower or her baby shower, whatever it is. Then, well, I need to do the same. So now we're going into a bridal shower. Now we're going into a baby shower. Now we're going to a birthday party. And yes, now many times people are asking, is a birthday haram? Is a birthday party haram? I wouldn't say the question is whether a birthday party is a haram or not. I would say, how did we get to the level where we would think that engaging in birthday parties is a necessity, where we would feel that, oh, I have to live up to that? What is more scary, what is more scary than just a birthday party? It's just a cake and some chips and some snacks here and there. What's the big idea about that? Well, the idea is not really just about whether celebrating that day when a person is born, but it's creating, that's the point, it's creating more times, more events for creating and expanding in our taraf. Even when you look at right now, a lot of the Islamic events are right now even going farther and farther in their taraf. Before it was talab al-ilm, and now it's no, we have to have snacks. Now we have to have cakes. Now we have to have a coffee table. And it's expanding in taraf, and it's making the people really forget that the main reason that they had come here is talab al-ilm. If it works expanding in our taraf, then we're contradicting ourselves. We're feeding our body than actually feeding our soul. And that's really dangerous, because what we're seeing right now, same thing, even Islamic centers, they're trying to decorate the walls. And when you talk about about spending for talab al-ilm, is spending for the students to actually learn their Islam, they'll tell you we don't have the budget to do so. When it's talking about spending to probably bring in more teachers, we don't have the budget to do that. It's the expenses are more focused on expanding the place, making it look more beautiful with more lights, with carpeting that is very luxurious that we'll get from Turkey, and with all these different decorations. We're trying to impress our vision rather than impress our hearts. And this is something that even Islamic centers are guilty of. We're confusing ourselves with what our goal is, what our expectations should be, what our energy should actually be focused in. And when we speak about energy, we're not just talking about physical energy, because money is energy. Our our time is energy. Our own mental power is energy. All of that energy, if it's not put in the goal for akhirah, then this goal is just wasted energy. Wasted energy, wasted money, wasted mental power, wasted power on all ends. The ummah's power, where and what are we expecting? What are we expecting to do? You see, what we're seeing, Islamic centers, even dua, even if we're talking about the Islamic center is really confused in its goals, then what's going to happen to the rest of the society? The rest of the society itself is also confused, where we need to have an Islamic center that looks outrageously luxurious in order to bring in the people in. Even the people, even the rest of the Muslim community, they've gotten so used to this luxurious appearance that even if it's a simple masjid, and you can have a masjid that barely has anything, it's just simple walls, a place to make sujood, actually have more light than another masjid that has all this decoration, all these different beautiful carpetings, and these chandeliers, and all of these things around, but then empty of the light of Iman. And that's the same thing that we're talking about. You can have a simple home, and you can have a simple person that is living on few meals, or at least a few bites, but have great nur in their heart. And you can have somebody on the other hand that has a very luxurious lifestyle, but is actually empty of the light in their hearts. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, اعلموا أنما الحياة الدنيا لعب وله وزينة وتفاخر بينكم وتكاثر في الأموال والأولاد كمثل غيث أعجب الكفار نباته ثم يهيج فتراه مصفرا ثم يكون حطاما وفي الآخرة عذاب شديد ومغفرة من الله ورضوان وما الحياة الدنيا إلا متاع الغرور. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and know that this hayat, this life of dunya, is nothing but mere play. Is all about just expanding in different forms of entertainment, different forms of zina, and different forms of enhancing our appearances, and later just a way of tafakhur, a way of bringing in pride in what we had gained, in whether it's what we had gained in wealth, what we had gained in children. And it's exactly like the rain that had actually been amusing and definitely very manipulating for the kuffar, where of course the rain brings in vegetation, it brings in all the different plants, and then it becomes so green and so pleasing to the person that sees it, and then it becomes yellow, and then it becomes nothing but just an old stick crop, in where it becomes brown, and then on Judgment Day it it's nothing but adab, nothing but a torment, painful torment. And وَمَغْفِرَةٌ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَرِضْوَانٌ. Or it could be a maghfirah, a forgiveness, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being content over you. And dunya is nothing but a place of ghurur, nothing but a delusion that people would actually live in, thinking that it's all about gathering more money, all about gathering and pleasing people and trying to gain some form of or thinking that it's getting an achievement by getting social status and all of that, when in reality people don't recognize. So what we really need is really learning how to define and redefine what it means to put your energy in the right place, and where and how we need to live our simple connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Taraf is an illness that is right now, the heart is really right now sick with. Our hearts, even the Islamic centers, are right now so focused on taraf that that's why we're actually empty of light for al-akhirah, because we're just seeking taraf. With this taraf, we're actually losing our focus on al-akhirah. We're losing our focus on trying to seek our principle, because we're just focused on taraf. That's why the Prophet ﷺ would always tell the Sahaba, he said, فَوَاللَّهِ مَا الْفَقْرُ أَخْشَى عَلَيْكُمْ وَلَكِنْ أَخْشَى عَلَيْكُمْ أَن تُبْسَطَ الدُّنْيا عَلَيْكُمْ كَمَا بَسَطَتْ عَلَى مَنْ كَانَ قَبْلَكُمْ فَتَنَافَسُوهَا كَمَا تَنَافَسُوهَا وَتُهْلِكَكُمْ كَمَا أَهْلَكَتْهُمْ. He said, I don't fear, the Prophet ﷺ, quote, he said, I don't fear poverty on you, but what I fear is that the dunya would actually get you more. And then, exactly like those that had gotten all the different luxury and how they got the different provisions, the opening of provisions had come to them, and then they started competing in it, and then it destructed them, and or what would destruct you as it destructed them. In other words, it becomes that they had created a need, then they start competing in trying to get to that need, and then they start going and putting the word tuhlikakum is really interesting, because el halak is not necessarily talking about a punishment, but it's actually talking about putting in wasted energy. That's el halak. El halak is when you're trying to get to a goal, but you put in the energy and then it doesn't get to the goal. It doesn't get to what you had wanted it to get to. It's exactly like when you're talking about you're trying to build a home, and then you're building, and then all of a sudden, something wrong happens, and then all the home just collapses. And you put so much energy in trying to build the home, but then it just collapsed right before your eyes. And that's one thing. That's al-halak. Al-halak is when you put the energy, but it doesn't get to the goal that was intended, that was intended for. And that's the same thing when we're actually looking at this dunya. We're putting in money energy, we're putting in our mental energy, our physical energy, our time energy. We're putting all this in and trying to invest in making something happen. But then our children are not getting the deen. Our children, ourselves, we're actually weaker in our iman, we're actually weaker in our ilm, we're actually weaker in our mental health, we're actually weaker in our physical health, we're actually weaker in our akhlaq, we're in every single end, even though we actually have the means. We've got the money, we've got the time, we've got the health, we've got all these different powers that the other areas don't have. The other areas, you go to Mauritania, you go to these different poor countries, they don't actually have what we have. Those are supposed to be tools, each and every single one of these. Just to have a home with an AC, for example, was something that they could dream for. But we've got everything. But then we don't seem to actually get to our goals, we're actually going backwards and not forwards. And the main reason to it is really this hadith. وَتُهْلِكَكُمْ كَمَا أَهْلَكَتْكُمْ كَمَا أهلكتهم. What the main reason is that we were destructed because we're just creating taraf. We're creating a new need and we didn't get to our goal. We're living the taraf and then we're not recognizing what is the problem. Then we start working on mental health. And without us recognizing, we're trying to pay more for mental health when it was really pay less. It was really, the secret was pay less in your lifestyle and the person's mental health was going to get better. Pay less in the amount that you spend on your home, the amount that you spend on your food, the amount that you spend on your clothes, the amount that you spend for entertainment, the amount that you spend on the food, and you'll find yourself getting better with your mental health. You're going to find yourself getting better with your deen. You're going to find yourself getting better even with your physical health. Obesity is going to become less, and the list goes on and on. It's spending less. That's why the Prophet said, "Ma naqasa malun min sadaqah." He said, no nation decreases wealth, even though the dunya definition, it's simple. I had 50,000 and I donated 10,000, then obviously the number that is left is 40,000. How is it that it didn't reduce? It did reduce, but the Prophet is telling you, no, it didn't reduce. How is that? It's simple math. And he's telling you because what you gained with these 10,000 that you had actually donated is even more valuable than what you had actually donated. What you had gained in your Iman, in your Akhirah, that was the best trade ever. That's why the Prophet is telling you, well, same thing. When you're actually fasting, the Prophet is basically teaching us that no, you're actually gaining. I'm gaining what? You're gaining health. When you're fasting, you're gaining health. It's not that by eating you're gaining health, it's by fasting you're gaining health. You might think of it, it's really the same way, and where no, it's giving. It's reducing from dunya in order to get to akhirah. And that's why there's a focus in Islam. The focus in Islam to warn us from expanding in our food and expanding in our eating. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا وَلَا تُسْرِفُوا إِنَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ الْمُسْرِفِينَ. And eat and drink, but on a condition, وَلَا تُسْرِفُوا. And do not engage in al-israf. What is al-israf? Al-israf is spending over the need, spending beyond your need. So if you've got leftovers, but then you decide that, no, I'm going to throw this away and I'm going to right now buy probably pizza or whatever it is, but you've got leftovers. Teach yourself and teach your children, if you've got leftovers, eat it. Why are you leaving this? Because this is going to be israf. Al-israf right there, إِنَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ الْمُسْرِفِينَ, is a key thing, because this is equivalent that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dislikes al-kuffar as well. In other words, the akhlaq of al-kuffar, the akhlaq of who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dislikes, is a person that engages in israf. In other words, what does it mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't like and dislikes a person that engages in israf? What does it mean to like and not like? When you say إِنَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ الْمُسْرِفِينَ, it actually means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not content over you. It actually means you're not getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're actually getting farther. It actually means that you're not getting the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It actually means that you yourself are putting yourself to be responsible for yourself and not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one that you're depending on. What does that mean? What are you getting into? Remember the dua. We would make the dua اللهم لا تكلني إلى نفسي طرفة عين. Ya Allah, don't make me responsible for myself, not even with a blink of an eye. In other words, don't let me depend everything on myself. Why? Because even if you were to depend on yourself with even for blinking your eyes, you're going to end up really putting a lot of energy in every single minute. Calculate, just Google how many times you blink every single minute, how many times you would blink the whole day. Imagine that you were going to put your focus just to blink those blinks and just put a timer just to blink those times. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, you need to recognize that it's really by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy, but by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power, that He's the one that is giving you the support. So here, when He says, وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا وَلَا تُسْرِفُوا, He's telling you, well, I want you to live up to eating and drinking, but on a condition that you do it in moderation. Why? Because if you are going to go beyond the moderate level, then in that situation, you're going to find yourself responsible for what you had actually had done for yourself. If you are right now obese, now you're going to carry the weight yourself. You put on that weight, you're going to carry it. You decided to carry it. You decided to put it on. You're going to carry it. And that's the same thing. You are going to carry all the different burdens yourself if you engage in al-israf. But here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was giving you that idea that, listen, if you live in the principle, you live in the moderation, then you're going to live with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving you the support. But if you go beyond, it's going to be your entitlement. It's going to be your responsibility. It's going to be a burden on you. And that's the same thing. When you start, the bigger the homes, you're going to be cleaning more. The more expensive the car is, well, yes, you might actually pay less in terms of maintaining the car and etc. If the car is probably more expensive because it's not going to need as much, but you're going to work. Hey, you're going to pay higher insurance, more than liability. You're going to pay higher insurance. You're going to pay higher in monthly payments, etc. Then you're the one that is putting yourself in that burden of needing to pay the monthly payments, needing to pay a month payment for mortgage, needing to pay a certain amount of money, needing to work to probably be capable of affording a name brand outfit, needing to work more in order to make a luxurious wedding. And without you recognizing, you made that burden. You didn't have to. You actually put that burden on your back, and you, without you recognizing, ahlakatkum. It, it basically destructed you. You ended up becoming a slave to yourself without you recognizing. That's why Sayyidah Aisha said that right there, that Sayyidah Aisha said that there were three different crescents. In other words, this is actually talking about three different months. 3 different months in where they did not have anything to eat except, she said, al-aswadan, the two black things. What two black things? He said, well, it was really just dates and water. And there were times where the Prophet ﷺ, the neighbors would give the Prophet ﷺ some milk and yogurt, and they would give something to the family. That was basically it. In other words, they were living a very simple life. And it didn't need to be a very expansive life, because the Prophet ﷺ, he actually wanted to live for al-akhirah. That's why the Prophet ﷺ, Ibn Abbas said that the Prophet ﷺ, many times he would sleep a number of consecutive days where they would not even have food to put for supper. They didn't have any food, and most of the times their food was nothing but barley. And barley is not like wheat, because barley is really hard. It's hard to digest, and it takes time, and it takes a lot of effort to even grind it and so forth. And that's, this one's really interesting. Umar ibn al-Khattab, he came to his son, visited his son, and then Abdullah ibn Umar, and then he saw that he had actually had meat, barbecue, steak, whatever it was. But he said, just said, what is this meat doing here? He said, oh, I really desired it. And Umar ibn Khattab said, وَكُلَّمَا اشْتَهَيْتَ شَيْئًا أَكَلْتُهُ. Is that every time that you desire something, you go out and eat it? Or in other words, you buy it? He said, كَفَى بِالْمَرْءِ صَرْفًا أَنْ يَأْكُلَ كُلَّ مَا اشْتَهَى. It is israf. It is beyond moderation, that every time they desire something, they go buy it. Not because every time you desire something, you go buy it. Not because, yes, I want this game, I go buy it. Or I want this outfit, I need to go buy it. Or I need this food. Oh, right now I'm really craving for this, I need to go buy it. This taraf is going to be the saraf. This taraf is the saraf. This luxury there, every time I hear something, I go get it, is basically a saraf, is that saraf, in where it is going beyond the moderation. And without us recognizing, it's actually taking our morality beyond the level of what Islam and what the Prophet ﷺ was actually teaching us. This is something that we really have to teach ourselves. This is something that I would tell myself. It's not just, me teaching it, but I would have to tell myself. We would always have to look into it, and that way you will find that you'll have more energy to do dhikr, more energy to do siyam, more energy, wealth and money to actually put in donations, more energy with your thought to think about something more important, rather than thinking about how to make a beautiful party every couple months, or every month or so. But maybe think about something more important. How can I actually make an Islamic event? Maybe you invite a speaker, and you decide to actually make an event, not necessarily an Islamic society or an Islamic organization. You decide to make an event yourself, and decide that, with this money, I'm going to actually bring in someone to teach Islam, maybe here and there. Or maybe I'm going to invite the girls to maybe do an Islamic halal camping, or etc. And therefore, you're the one that's going to create. You see, most of the times what we're seeing is that people are complaining. Why are Islamic centers doing this? Why aren't the du'at doing this? You make what you think is necessary and is needed. Don't wait for others to do it. That's what leaders do. If you think, and if you know that our masajid are missing this, you do the event that you think is important. You make the things that you are criticizing the society of not having, rather than cursing the dark. You burn and turn and light a candle. You make the change. And that's the same thing. You will not be capable of having your energy, your forces recognized, if you're constantly just putting this energy and this force of yours for taraf. A taraf is going to create in you a bigger need for, is going to expand your need. And without you recognizing, you're basically going to start living, running after that need, a slave to this new need that you had manipulated yourself into. And then you're going to find yourself running after dunya. Taraf is dunya. Taraf is what Islam and the Quran were always warning the Muslims from engaging in. Next week, inshallah, we'll continue with more about taraf, because this is extremely important. because there's no way that you can live your spirituality, your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you're engaging in taraf. And barakallahu fikum. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there, I know there's so much to actually say. There's so much to say, and because we're still not finished with this topic, but hopefully inshallah next week we'll continue more inshallah. So if there are any questions, I believe you can raise your hand or something, and then we could unmute. Go ahead, Ayan.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikha. I just had a question about like the eating. Ironically, I was like eating lunch when you started talking about it. But yeah, so how do we, because in a society where like most people are eating in a fed state, you eat breakfast, you eat lunch, and you're not really hungry when you eat lunch, and then you kind of just eat dinner. Well, I'm just speaking for myself and like the people around me. You see Starbucks around the corner, you don't really need it, but you're like, oh, why not? How do we, like in a society like that, like how do we kind of like practically like implement these things? Because gluttony is something that I fear for myself. I don't even know how to define it really. So maybe if you could maybe explain what gluttony kind of looks like.
Right. So
Yeah.
one thing is that, what would help, number one, is that the idea of 3 meals a day is not an Islamic idea. The idea of 3 meals a day is not an Islamic idea. The Islamic idea is 2 meals a day, not 3. All right. So this breakfast, lunch, and dinner is not Islamic. It's actually a breakfast in the morning and the lunch, or at least the second meal, which is usually around Maghrib time. That was the Islamic practice. The 3 meal day, it was more of a Western practice than actually a Muslim practice. That's number one. Number two is that avoid a lot of these side drinks and these side foods. Make it like it's well, I'm going to eat my breakfast and basically it, and then probably maybe my supper or the main meal, maybe around Asr or Maghrib time, that would be that main meal. So all the side ones, here a donut there, and there maybe a cookie, and there, and of course the pantry. Cut down on your expenses. It's like, okay, let's say you're buying $200 every 2 weeks of different things. Ask yourself, is this necessary? Do I really need all of that? A lot of those, I would say, cutting down on the different luxurious foods, and what I mean by that, it's usually the carbs, the cakes. Those luxurious foods are usually the ones to take a lot of making and giving us the what is not part of necessity. That's a start, and then you can create later, how do I give up on what is not a necessity? Do I need Starbucks every day? Do I need a donut every day? Do I really need these breads every day? Do I really need to have meat in every single meal that I'm eating? Do I need to have every single day? What do I really need to have? How do I actually live that? That's inshallah something we're going to talk about next week. But it's important to work on reviewing yourself. Why don't I eat the leftovers? And by the way, it's important to keep in mind that by eating the leftovers, you're doing a form of dhikr. By eating simple foods, it's a form of dhikr. You're doing a form of dhikr by doing that, because by keeping away from taraf, that's what's actually keeping you away from dunya. So by giving up on a pizza, for example, you're actually keeping away from taraf. You're actually, I'm not against pizza, okay? I'm not against pizza here, but I'm just giving you an idea that not because it's available. And it's really sad that right now we're seeing every single event, and the events before were actually simpler. Now the events are starting to get even higher in taraf, and now we're seeing not one form, but no, many forms of sweets, many forms of drink, many forms of foods, many, and etc. And then it becomes, oh, I need more, and keep on filling more and filling more. And without you recognizing, we're actually lost. We're actually lost in our akhirah, because we're just feeding ourselves more. So what I would really recommend, maybe working out, making a regimen of what am I eating and working out, I think is extremely important, because working out does actually get you into feeling that, oh, I need to work out, and I need to keep, maybe the scale to help you on what you need to cut down on, to give you an amount of number. Look at your BMI and see what number do I need to get to. Maybe that will help you. Knowing on how much you need to cut down on, maybe that'll help you when you, especially during our times where everything's all about numbers, trying to work on a diet, I think does actually help in getting into what does it mean ولا تسرفوا. So maybe working out on your diet probably helps that. So hopefully, inshallah, that will encourage you. Well, let me give up on my cheese. Let me give up on my calories. Let me give up on that. And little by little, you're gonna find yourself, okay, I'm getting into the numbers of recognizing where wala tusrifu is. So let's work it out on together. Maybe the Islamic centers or maybe Gems of Light should actually do a weight loss, right? A weight loss competition. Yeah, we should do that. Or maybe the Islamic Center could do it. I hope I answered that one, Ayan.
Yes, jazakallah khair.
وإياكم. All right, any other questions? Well, inshallah, we'll see you all. ربي يحفظكم جميعا and السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.